Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
The voice, sharp and clear, sliced through the derisive laughter. It wasn't mine. Mine was trapped in my throat, strangled by a sudden, icy shame. I was frozen on the park bench, my arms instinctively crossed over my chest, a pathetic attempt to hide the subtle, but undeniable outline of a bra beneath my thin t-shirt. We were just the teenager, the ringleader of the small pack that had cornered us, stammered, taken aback. "I know what you were just doing," she cut in, her voice dangerously calm. My girlfriend, Chloe, stood up, placing herself slightly in front of me like a shield. Her back was a rigid line of defiance. "You were being rude, ignorant little boys. Don't you have anything better to do?" "Whatever," another one muttered, trying to reclaim his swagger. "It's just weird, that's all." A dude wearing girls' clothes. My blood ran cold. They had seen everything. The bra, the sliver of black fishnet stocking visible between the cuff of my jeans and the top of my sneaker. The secret world I had so carefully constructed was being torn apart by teenage mockery. Then Chloe did something that shattered my fear into a million pieces of pure awe. She looked the ringleader dead in the eye. "First of all," she said, her voice low and furious, "they're just clothes. Fabric. Get over it. Second of all," she gestured with a sweep of her hand toward my legs, "those aren't just any stockings. They're my Vivienne Westwoods. I asked him to wear them for me." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "And you know what? He looks amazing in them. Way better than you ever could." Then she turned to me, her expression softening completely as her eyes met mine. She reached down, took my hand, and pulled me to my feet beside her. Her grip was an anchor in the storm of my humiliation. "Don't you hide," she whispered, for my ears only. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." The message tone on my phone chirped. A single sharp note that cut through the quiet hum of my apartment. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, staring into the depths of a cooling cup of coffee, watching the steam curl and vanish like a ghost. Outside, the world was a watercolor painting of late autumn. The sky was a soft, overcast gray, and the maple tree across the street was shedding its last brilliant leaves, carpeting the sidewalk in a mosaic of gold and crimson. I picked up the phone. The screen glowed, illuminating a new text from Chloe. My heart did a familiar little flip-flop, a mix of warmth and anticipation that I only ever felt with her. "Hey, you remembered to bring my stockings, right? Meet me at our bench by the lake." My breath hitched. My fingers went cold around the warm ceramic of my mug. I read the message again, and a third time. It wasn't the request itself that shocked me. I had her stockings. They were mine now, really. She'd left them here weeks ago, a black lacy pair that I'd immediately claimed for my private collection. The shock came from the casual, public nature of her request. "Meet me at our bench by the lake." In the middle of a Saturday morning. She wanted me to wear them outside. A tremor started in my hand, and I set the coffee mug down before I spilled it. This was new territory. This was a massive leap across a chasm I had only ever peeked over the edge of for years. This part of me had lived exclusively within the four walls of my bedroom. It was a creature of shadow and solitude, a secret whispered only to myself in the reflection of a full-length mirror. Chloe knew. Of course she knew. I had told her about 6 months into our relationship, my voice trembling, my eyes fixed on a loose thread on the sofa cushion, expecting the world to end. I'd told her about the what, but not the why, not the deep, bone marrow-level feeling of it. She knew I, Leo, a 25-year-old man who worked a 9 to 5 office job and played pickup basketball on weekends, liked to wear women's clothing. Her reaction had been perfect. She hadn't laughed. She hadn't recoiled. She had just listened, her brow furrowed in concentration. And when I was done, she'd taken my hand and said, "Okay. Thanks for telling me." And that was it. Life went on. But now this text message felt like a door creaking open. She wasn't just tolerating my secret. She was inviting it out into the light. I pushed my chair back and walked into my bedroom. The air was cool. I went straight to my dresser, my steps feeling heavy. Deliberate.my top drawer was a study in organized masculinity. Neat piles of black, gray, and white socks, a row of boxer briefs. But it was the bottom drawer that held my truth. I pulled it open slowly, the woodrunners groaning in protest. Inside was a different universe, a world of silk, lace, and nylon. A rainbow of colors and textures that felt more like me than anything in the rest of my closet. There were satin panties in jewel tones, delicate bralettes with intricate straps, and of course, the stockings. Hosiery was my first love, my genesis. My collection was extensive: sheer nudes, opaque blacks, thigh-highs with silicone grips, and garter belts to hold them in place. My fingers brushed past a pair of soft pink silk panties and landed on the item in question. They weren't just any stockings. These were special, a gift to myself after a hard-won promotion at work. They were from Vivienne Westwood, a brand that screamed elegant rebellion. They were fishnets, but not the cheap, trashy kind. The mesh was fine, delicate, and woven into the pattern were subtle, black-on-black floral designs, vines that would look like they were climbing my legs. The material was a high-quality nylon blend, cool and smooth to the touch, with a surprising strength. It promised to stretch and cling, to become what the packaging had so poetically called a second skin. Holding them in my hands, a flood of memories washed over me. It always started this way. The feel of the fabric was a key, unlocking doors in my mind that I kept shut most of the day. I was 8 years old, hiding in my older sister Clara's closet. It was my secret kingdom. It smelled of her perfume, a light floral scent, and the starchy cleanliness of her clothes. I wasn't interested in her toys or her diaries. I was mesmerized by her dresses. There was one in particular, a pale yellow sundress with a full, twirly skirt and a bodice adorned with tiny seed pearl buttons. One afternoon, while everyone was downstairs, I slipped it on over my t-shirt and shorts. The fabric was crisp cotton, cool against my skin. I stood in front of her mirror, the one with the white painted frame, and I turned. The skirt flared out around me, a perfect, spinning circle of sunshine yellow. In that moment, something clicked into place inside my chest. It wasn't about wanting to be a girl. I didn't feel like a girl. I felt beautiful. I felt complete, like a puzzle piece I didn't even know was missing had just been found and slotted home. The feeling was so pure, so euphoric, that the terror of my mom yelling for me from the bottom of the stairs was a physical shock, like being doused in ice water. Then came the teenage years, the furtive trips to the department store, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I'd walk through the men's section, pick up a random pair of jeans, and then, feigning a wrong turn, I'd drift into the vast, intimidating expanse of the lingerie department. I'd grab the first thing that looked right, a simple pair of black sheer-to-waist pantyhose, and bury them under the jeans, my face burning with a shame so hot I was sure the cashier could feel its heat radiating off me. Getting them home felt like a successful heist. I'd lock my bedroom door, tear open the cardboard packaging, and the whisper of the nylon as I pulled them on was the sweetest sound in the world. Now, standing here in my own apartment, a grown man with a job and a car and a girlfriend who loved me, that same cocktail of fear and exhilaration was bubbling up inside me. The fear was a remnant of those years of hiding, the ingrained societal message that what I was doing was wrong. But the exhilaration, that was all mine. It was the promise of feeling that same wholeness I'd felt spinning in my sister's dress. Chloe was asking me to bring that part of myself out of the shadows. Could I do it? I looked from the stockings in my hand to my reflection in the dresser mirror. Just a regular guy. But I knew what was underneath. Her message wasn't a command. It was an invitation. An invitation to be brave. Okay, I whispered to my reflection. Okay, let's do this. My decision made, a new kind of energy took over. A focused, ritualistic calm. This wasn't just about putting on clothes. It was a transformation. It started with preparation. I went into the bathroom and took a quick, hot shower, meticulously shaving my legs. The scrape of the razor was a familiar rhythm. I'd been doing this for years, long before I'd ever admitted it to anyone. Smooth skin was essential. It was the canvas. The feel of hosiery on hairy legs was all wrong, a sensory betrayal. The smooth, clean surface was everything. Back in the bedroom, I laid out my ensemble on the bed like a general planning a campaign. First, the foundation. I chose a pair of panties I knew were comfortable and wouldn't create an obvious line. They were a deep cherry red lace, a cheeky secret no one but me, and soon Chloe, would know about. Putting them on was the first step across the threshold. The soft, feminine fabric against my skin was an instant comfort, a quiet affirmation. Next came the bra. This was often the most psychologically challenging part. I didn't have breasts to fill it, of course, but that wasn't the point. The point was the silhouette, the feeling of the straps on my shoulders and the band around my chest. It created a subtle shape, a feeling of being held and defined in a way that was profoundly comforting. I chose a simple black t-shirt bra with light padding. I turned my back to the mirror, reached behind to fasten the hooks and eyes, and the little metallic click as they connected was the sound of a lock turning. I adjusted the straps, pulling them snug on my shoulders. I turned to face the mirror. The sight was still jarring, a man's torso constrained by this delicate garment, but then I looked closer. I saw the way it subtly pulled my shoulders back, the way it made me feel. And it felt right. Finally, the main event, the Vivienne Westwood stockings. I sat on the edge of my bed, the cool air raising goosebumps on my freshly shaven legs. I picked up the first stocking and bunched the delicate fishnet fabric all the way down to the toe, my fingers working carefully. I pointed my toes and slid the stocking over my foot. The sensation was electric. The cool, smooth nylon against my warm skin. I pulled it up slowly, painstakingly, over my calf, over my knee, letting the intricate floral pattern unfurl as it climbed my leg. I got it all the way up to my thigh and smoothed it out, making sure the almost invisible back seam was perfectly straight. A crooked seam was an unforgivable sin. When both were on, I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror. I had to catch my breath. My legs, which I usually thought of as just functional, were transformed. They looked longer, more elegant. The black fishnet with its subtle, climbing vines was a work of art. A wave of pure happiness washed over me. This was the feeling. This was the why. It wasn't about sex. It was about aesthetics, about self-expression, about seeing a version of myself in the mirror that felt more complete than the one I presented to the world every day. The euphoria was quickly tempered by the reality of my task. I still had to go outside. I pulled on a pair of dark wash, slim-fit jeans, carefully easing them over the delicate stockings. I put on a plain gray t-shirt, which did a decent job of hiding the lines of the bra, and then a thick, dark green zip-up hoodie over that. For my feet, a pair of simple black canvas sneakers. My disguise was complete. I took one last look in the mirror. To any casual observer, I was just a guy dressed for a cool autumn day. But I knew. I could feel the secret humming against my skin, the lace at my hips, the band of the bra around my ribs, the snug mesh of the stockings encasing my legs. My heart began to pound again. The journey to the park suddenly seemed like a trek across a hostile, alien landscape. Leaving the apartment was the hardest part. The click of the front door locking behind me sounded unnaturally loud, a definitive sound that meant there was no turning back. I was in the wild now. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, not wanting to risk the forced intimacy of a small, enclosed space with a neighbor. Each step was a tiny, calculated risk. My jeans felt too thin. The dark wash was supposed to be camouflage, but now I was convinced the subtle fishnet pattern was visible through the fabric. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air hit me immediately. It was cool and crisp, but it was the wind that seized my attention. It slipped through the weave of my jeans and then, unimpeded, through the diamond-shaped holes of the fishnets. The sensation was indescribable. 1,000 tiny, cool kisses dancing across my skin from my ankles all the way up to my thighs. It was an electric tingle, a constant physical reminder of what I was wearing. Part of me was terrified, but another, smaller part of me was thrilled by it. The walk to the park was only 10 minutes, but it felt like 10 miles. Every person I passed was a potential judge and jury. A woman pushing a stroller glanced in my direction. Was she looking at me? 2 college-aged guys laughing on a stoop. Were they laughing at me? My biggest fear was the visible panty line, the VPL. Paranoia screamed in my ear that the red lace was creating a ridge as obvious as a mountain range under my jeans. I had to stop at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. I was surrounded. I stood perfectly still, trying to breathe normally. A little boy behind me dropped a toy car, and it clattered near my feet. I didn't move. I was convinced that if I bent over, the back of my t-shirt would ride up, revealing the outline of the bra strap. The father bent down to get the car. As he stood up, his eyes briefly met mine. It was a meaningless, fleeting moment, but in my supercharged state, it felt like an accusation. Did he see something? Did he know? The little white walk sign was a beacon of salvation. I moved with the crowd, and the relief was so intense it was dizzying. As I got closer to the park, the crowds thinned. The city noise began to fade, replaced by the rustle of leaves. Inside the park was beautiful. Sunlight, weak but persistent, filtered through the thinning canopy of the trees. The air was cleaner here. The feeling of the wind through the fishnets changed. Out on the street, it had felt invasive. Here, surrounded by the quiet dignity of the trees, it felt liberating. Our bench was in a secluded spot overlooking the small, placid lake. It was set back from the main path, partially hidden by a large weeping willow. And there she was. Chloe was sitting on the bench facing the water, her back to me. Just the sight of her was enough to make the last vestiges of my anxiety melt away. She was my safe harbor. The leaves crunched under my sneakers. She heard me and turned her head. A smile bloomed on her face, a smile so warm and genuine it could have melted the autumn frost. "Hey, you," she said, her voice carrying on the breeze. "You made it." I walked the last few feet and sat down next to her on the cold wooden bench. The space between us buzzed with an unspoken energy. I didn't know what to say. Chloe didn't press. She just leaned over and gave me a soft kiss on the cheek, then rested her head on my shoulder. We sat in silence for a moment, looking out at the water. Ducks paddled by in a neat line. The silence was comfortable, easy, but the secret I was wearing was a living thing between us. I could feel the nylon against my skin, the lace at my hips, the straps on my shoulders. Finally, she lifted her head and looked at me, her eyes a warm, deep brown, searching mine. "So," she asked, a playful little smirk on her lips. "How does it feel?" The question hung in the air, simple and direct. "It feels a lot," I said finally. "Scary. Exciting. A little bit insane." She smiled, a real, understanding smile. She reached out, not with hesitation but with a gentle certainty, and placed her hand on my thigh, right over the dark denim. Her fingers were warm, and I could feel their light pressure through the jeans and through the fine mesh of the stockings beneath. The layered sensation was intimate and electrifying. "Are they the ones I think they are?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "The Vivienne Westwoods. The floral ones." "I loved those," she said with a wider smile. "Are you comfortable?" I know this was a big ask. "I am now," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said all day. The walk here was intense. I thought everyone was staring. "I get that," she said, her thumb tracing a slow circle on my knee. "But do you like it? Putting aside the fear, just for you. How do you feel?" I looked away from her, out at the lake. When I was a kid, I started, the words coming slowly, I used to sneak into my sister's closet. There was this one dress. It was yellow. And when I put it on and spun around, the skirt would fly out. For just a second, it felt like I was flying. It felt right. Wearing this stuff, I paused. It's like that. It's like I get to access a version of myself that's usually locked away. A version that's more elegant, more artistic, more beautiful. My voice cracked, and I felt a hot sting behind my eyes. Chloe's hand moved from my knee up to my face, her thumb gently brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had escaped. "Thank you for telling me that," she whispered. "It's not about wanting to be a woman." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I like being a man. I like being your boyfriend. I also like this. I like feeling beautiful in this way." A watery laugh bubbled up out of me. It was absurd and profound all at once. Chloe laughed with me. Well, she said, her eyes twinkling, for what it's worth, I always thought you had great legs. Seems a shame to hide them in boring dude pants all the time. Her casual acceptance was like a balm. Then she shifted on the bench, a new look in her eye, a hint of playful mischief. Can I ask you something else? Anything, I replied, feeling brave. Are you wearing anything else? Special, she asked, her voice a low murmur. My cheeks flushed. Yeah, I nodded. Red lace panties. And a bra. A bra, really? Her eyebrows shot up. Yeah, it's part of the feeling. The silhouette. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she leaned in closer, her scent, apples and vanilla, filling my senses. Can I see it? She whispered, her breath warm against my ear. My heart hammered. See it? Here. Not all of it, she clarified with a small laugh. Just, you're wearing that hoodie. Would you take it off? I just want to see the outline under your shirt. I want to picture it. This was a new level of vulnerability. I looked around. The park was quiet. I looked back at Chloe. Her eyes were wide, filled with nothing but sincere curiosity and a deep, abiding affection. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I reached for the zipper on my hoodie. The metallic rasp sounded like a thunderclap. I shrugged the hoodie off. Now I was just in my gray t-shirt. The fabric was soft and thin, and it clung slightly to my chest. And there it was, the subtle, undeniable outline of the bra. I couldn't look at her. I stared down at my hands, feeling incredibly exposed. The silence stretched on. Then, I felt her touch, featherlight. She reached out and gently traced the outline of the cup with her fingertip, right through the fabric of my t-shirt. Her touch was reverent. Oh, she breathed out a soft, wondrous sound. I see. I finally dared to look up at her. Her face was inches from mine. It looks, she said, her eyes meeting mine, it looks right on you. And in that moment, a tightly wound knot of shame and fear that I had carried for 20 years, finally, completely let go. I felt seen. I felt whole. I leaned in to kiss her, a kiss of profound gratitude. It was in that perfect, suspended moment that the outside world decided to intrude. Whoa, dude. What the hell? The voice was young, loud, and dripping with derision. It sliced through our private bubble like a shard of glass. The confrontation played out exactly as I remembered, a surreal out-of-body experience. Chloe's fierce defense, her claiming of me, her absolute refusal to let me be ashamed, it was a force of nature. When the teenage boys shuffled away, defeated and muttering, we were left standing in the sudden, ringing silence. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from awe. You were incredible, I finally managed to say, pulling her into a hug, burying my face in the comforting scent of her hair. They were jerks, she said into my sweater. You did nothing wrong. She pulled back and looked me up and down, a proud smile on her face. And for the record, I meant what I said. You do look amazing. The shame that had flooded me was gone, washed away by her loyalty. It was replaced by a defiant pride. Come on, she said, taking my hand again. Let's walk. She didn't wait for me to put my hoodie back on. And so I walked, hand in hand with my girlfriend, in my gray t-shirt with the faint outline of a bra. This time I walked tall. The cool wind on my legs no longer felt like an exposure, it felt like a celebration. The gentle friction of the fishnets against my skin was no longer a source of paranoia, it was a reminder of my own courage and Chloe's love. We walked to a quieter, more wooded part of the park and stopped beneath a magnificent old oak tree. I'm proud of you today, Chloe said softly. I'm proud of you, I countered. You were like a superhero. She laughed, a full, joyous sound. I won't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed for being who you are. Not when you're with me. Her promise settled deep inside me, the foundation of something new and stronger. I leaned in and kissed her, a kiss of shared victory. Later, back at my apartment, the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows. We sat on the sofa with steaming mugs of tea. So, Chloe said, a thoughtful look on her face. Serious question. Now that you've worn them out in the world, are you glad you did? Yes, I said without hesitation. It was terrifying, but it was worth it because of you. I think this changes things for me. How so? I've always thought of this as something I had to hide, I explained. But today it was out in the light and the world didn't end. In fact, you made the world better. She blushed slightly. I just want you to be happy. All of you. A sly, playful glint appeared in her eye. You know, she said casually, your birthday is in a few weeks. It is, I confirmed, curious. And I was thinking. I saw this set online the other day. I was actually looking for myself, but now I'm thinking it might be a better gift for you. My heart gave a little lurch of anticipation. A set? MHM, she hummed. A full lingerie set. It was this gorgeous deep midnight blue silk with black lace trim. A beautiful demi-cut bra, a matching thing, and a garter belt. The word hung in the air, shimmering. A garter belt was a whole other level, something I'd only dreamed of. And I thought, she continued, her eyes locked on mine, full of love and a thrilling mischief, it would look perfect with a pair of sheer black backseam stockings. The really classic kind. I was speechless. This wasn't just acceptance or defense. This was active, enthusiastic participation. She wasn't just letting me into her world, she was offering to help me build my own. The idea of her, of Chloe, picking out lingerie for me, was the most intimate, most loving gesture I could possibly imagine. Chloe, I finally managed to say, my voice thick. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she said softly, reaching across the sofa to take my hand. Just let me get you a really great birthday present. Let me see you happy. Later that evening, after Chloe had gone home, I stood in my bedroom once more. I hadn't taken off the stockings yet. They felt different now, no longer a secret indulgence, but a memory, a symbol. I stood in front of the full-length mirror just as I had that morning, but the man looking back at me was not the same. The fear in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He looked whole. These stockings were no longer just Chloe's stockings. They were our stockings. They were the threads that had pulled my secret self out of the shadows and woven it directly into the fabric of our love. My birthday was a few weeks away, and for the first time, I looked toward the future not with apprehension about who I had to be, but with breathless excitement about who I was becoming and the incredible woman who would be by my side to see it. A new beginning, held together by love, trust, and the promise of midnight blue silk. The days that followed our walk in the park were different. The air in my apartment felt lighter, the corners less shadowed. The confrontation with the teenagers, which I thought would be a scar, had instead become a strange sort of foundation stone. It was a memory of the worst-case scenario, and I had survived it. More than that, we had survived it. My secret world, once confined to the bottom drawer of my dresser, began to bleed into my everyday life in subtle ways. I found myself choosing my male clothes with a new sensibility. I gravitated toward softer cottons, shirts with a more fluid drape, a pair of dark velvet trousers I'd bought on a whim and never dared to wear. They weren't women's clothes, not by any stretch, but they were chosen with the same aesthetic appreciation, the same attention to texture and feel that guided my private collection. It was as if a filter had been lifted, and I could finally see and appreciate beauty in a wider spectrum. The bottom drawer itself was no longer a vault of shame. Opening it didn't come with the familiar pang of fear. It felt more like visiting a gallery or an archive. My collection, my truth. The Vivienne Westwood stockings were folded carefully in their original box, not hidden, but preserved. They were an artifact now, a relic of a pivotal day. Chloe and I had a new language. Midnight blue silk became our code, a shorthand for the future, for this new, shared frontier we were exploring. She would text me during the day, thinking about midnight blue, and my heart would do that same flip-flop, a feeling now unburdened by anxiety and full of pure, thrilling anticipation. One evening, about a week before my birthday, I was putting away laundry. I opened the bottom drawer and just looked at the contents, the jewel-toned panties, the intricate bralettes. I reached in and pulled out a simple, soft-cut bra made of dove-gray jersey. On impulse, I slipped it on under my t-shirt. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't planning a full ritual. I just wanted to feel it. I walked into the living room where Chloe was reading on the sofa. I sat down and she looked up, her eyes crinkling in a smile. She didn't say anything for a moment, but then her gaze flickered down to my chest for a fraction of a second, and a look of quiet understanding passed over her face. She knew. She simply reached out, squeezed my hand, and went back to her book. In that small, silent gesture, everything was confirmed. This was my new normal. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a secret that needed to be ceremoniously revealed. It was just a part of me, a part that could now exist quietly and comfortably in the shared space of our life. The fear that had screamed in my ears for so long had been reduced to a whisper, and in its place, I could finally hear the steady, calming sound of acceptance. The morning of my birthday arrived on a wave of crisp, clear November air. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Chloe. "Happy birthday, my love. I have something for you. Don't make any plans tonight. I'm picking you up at 7. I smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached my eyes. The promise of midnight blue silk was about to be fulfilled. The workday was a strange, disconnected experience. The fluorescent lights of the office felt harsher than usual, the drone of computers and phones a dull counterpoint to the vibrant symphony of anticipation playing in my head. My colleagues, well-meaning as they were, presented me with a small cardboard cake with waxy frosting. They sang a slightly off-key happy birthday, and I smiled and said my thank yous, feeling like an actor playing the part of Leo, the regular office guy. They saw the costume, and today, for the first time, it didn't bother me. I knew what was waiting for me after I clocked out. I left work the second the clock hit 5, my heart thrumming with an energy that had nothing to do with caffeine. The drive home was a blur. I walked into my apartment, and the quiet space felt charged with potential. The late afternoon light was already fading, and the world outside was slipping into the deep blues of twilight. This time, the ritual of preparation was not driven by a cocktail of fear and exhilaration, but by pure, unadulterated joy. It felt less like a secret indulgence and more like a sacred ceremony. I ran a hot shower, letting the steam fill the bathroom until the mirror was completely fogged over, erasing my reflection. I didn't need the mirror tonight. I wasn't seeking a hidden version of myself. I was preparing to be seen. The meticulous process of shaving my legs was no longer about creating a flawless canvas for a private exhibition. It was an act of care, like polishing silver before a feast. Every stroke of the razor was deliberate, imbued with the knowledge that Chloe's hands would soon trace these same lines. I used my best shaving cream, the one with a subtle sandalwood scent, and when I was done, my skin was impossibly smooth, tingling with life. I stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in my softest, largest towel. I didn't reach for the bottom drawer. Tonight's ensemble was being delivered. I was the canvas and Chloe was the artist. Instead, I put on a simple, comfortable pair of my own boxer briefs and a plush, dark gray bathrobe. It felt right to wait, to meet her offering not with my own secrets, but with an open and receptive vulnerability. I spent the next hour in a state of suspended animation, trying to read a book but just staring at the words, listening to music but not really hearing it. Every nerve ending was attuned to the clock on the wall, to the inevitable sound that would signal her arrival. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell chimed. My breath caught. I walked to the door, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor, the belt of my robe cinched tight. I took one steadying breath and opened it. There she was. Chloe stood in the hallway, her face illuminated by the warm light from my apartment. She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, and her smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. In her hands, she held a gift box. It wasn't large, but it felt momentous, wrapped in thick, matte paper the color of a twilight sky, and tied with a single black satin ribbon. "Happy birthday, Leo," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with a shared, thrilling secret. "You look beautiful," I managed to say, my voice a little rough. She smiled, a flush rising on her cheeks. "You're not so bad yourself," she teased, gesturing to my bathrobe. "Very distinguished." She stepped inside, bringing the crisp night air and the faint scent of her perfume, that familiar apple and vanilla, with her. I closed the door, shutting out the rest of the world. For a moment, we just stood there in the entryway, the gift box a tangible presence between us. "Can I?" I asked, my gaze fixed on the box. "It's all yours," she said, her voice filled with a happy, nervous energy. She followed me into the living room. I didn't turn on the main overhead light, leaving us in the soft, intimate glow of a single floor lamp. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands feeling clumsy and overly large. Chloe settled onto the armchair opposite me, curling her legs beneath her, a silent, expectant observer. I placed the box on the coffee table in front of me. For a moment, I just looked at it. The paper was heavy, luxurious. This wasn't just a gift, it was a statement. I carefully untied the satin ribbon, its smooth texture a prelude to what was inside. I slid my finger under the paper's edge and tore it open, the sound loud in the quiet room. Inside the plain cardboard box, nestled in layers of crinkling black tissue paper, was the treasure. The first thing I saw was the color. Midnight blue. It was deeper and richer than I had imagined, a blue so dark it was almost black, but when the light caught it, it shimmered with an inner life. It was silk, true silk, cool and impossibly smooth to the touch. With trembling fingers, I lifted the first piece from the tissue paper. It was the bra. A demi-cup, just as she described, designed to lift and present rather than to cover. The cups were pure midnight blue silk, and overlaid on top, tracing the edges and forming the delicate straps, was a web of intricate black lace. It was exquisite, a piece of miniature architecture designed for the body. It was both powerful and delicate, a perfect paradox. I set it down reverently on the tissue paper and reached back in. Next came the thong. It was a whisper of a thing, a simple triangle of the same blue silk in the front, with the same black lace tracing the edges, held together by thin, elegant straps. The craftsmanship was stunning. Then, my breath hitched. The garter belt. It was wider than I'd expected, a band of silk and lace designed to sit at the natural waist. For delicate, adjustable straps with silver-toned hardware hung from it, waiting for their purpose. It was the centerpiece, the item that transformed separate pieces into a complete, intentional ensemble. It was pure, unapologetic elegance. Finally, at the very bottom of the box, wrapped in their own cellophane sleeve, were the stockings. Sheer black, as promised. But when I slid them out, I saw the detail I hadn't expected. Running up the back of each leg, from heel to the top, was a single, perfectly stitched black seam. The back seam. The absolute classic. The pinnacle of vintage glamour. I laid all the pieces out on the black tissue paper, a constellation of silk and lace and nylon. It was more beautiful than anything I owned, more beautiful than anything I would have dared to buy for myself. It was a fantasy made real. I looked up at Chloe. Her face was soft, her eyes watching me, taking in my reaction. She was biting her lower lip, a small tell that revealed her own vulnerability in this moment. "Chloe," I whispered. "It's perfect. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." A slow, radiant smile spread across her face. "I'm so glad," she said. "I hoped you'd think so." She paused, then asked the question that hung in the air, laden with thrilling possibility. "Do you want to try it on?" My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, joyful rhythm. The question wasn't just about putting on clothes. It was an invitation to share the most private, transformative part of my world with her, not just in theory or through outlines under a t-shirt, but in full, vivid detail. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I don't want to just disappear into the bedroom and come back out." The old ritual felt wrong now. It was a solitary act, born of secrecy. This needed to be different. I want you to be here." A flicker of surprise, then a deep, warm understanding filled her eyes. "Okay," she said softly. "Whatever you want. I'm not going anywhere." I stood up, the bathrobe feeling suddenly inadequate, a flimsy costume before the main event. I walked over to the gift box and gathered the pieces, the cool silk a jolt against my warm skin. I didn't go to the bedroom. I went to the full-length mirror that leaned against the wall in the corner of my living room, the same mirror where I had confronted my reflection on the day of the walk in the park. I turned to face it, my back to Chloe. I could feel her presence in the room, a warm, steady weight. This was infinitely more vulnerable than being alone. I took a deep breath and let the bathrobe slide from my shoulders, letting it pool at my feet. I stood for a moment in just my boxer briefs, my body exposed in the soft lamplight. Then I began. First, I removed the boxers and put on the thong. The silk was a cool, liquid caress against my skin. It fit perfectly, a whisper of fabric that was both incredibly light and profoundly present. Next, the bra. I held it against my chest and reached behind me, my fingers finding the familiar hooks and eyes. The metallic click echoed the sound from weeks ago, but this time it wasn't a lock turning, it was a door opening. I adjusted the straps, settling them onto my shoulders. I paused, meeting my own eyes in the mirror. The man looking back at me was the same, yet utterly different. The midnight blue silk and black lace stood in stark, beautiful contrast to my masculine frame. It wasn't jarring anymore. It was just me. Then, the garter belt. I stepped into it and pulled it up to my waist. The fit was snug, a comforting, defining pressure. The 4 straps hung down, waiting. Finally, the stockings. I sat on the floor, my back still to Chloe, and began the meticulous process. I bunched the sheer nylon down to the toe and slid it over my foot, the sensation as electric as ever. I drew it slowly up my leg, the fabric sheathing my skin in a fine, dark mist. I stood and attached the top of the stocking to the garter clip, the little rubber nubbin snapping securely into place. The faint tension was a new and exquisite feeling. I repeated the process with the other leg, taking my time, making sure the back seams were perfectly, flawlessly straight. When I was done, I stood there for a long moment, just looking at my own reflection. This was the vision I had held in my mind for years, a distant, impossible dream. My legs, encased in sheer black, looked impossibly long and elegant. The perfect back seam created a line of pure artistry. The garter belt defined my waist, connecting the lower and upper halves of the ensemble into a single, cohesive statement. The bra gave my torso a subtle, comforting shape. It was a masterpiece. I felt a wave of emotion so powerful it made my knees feel weak. It was gratitude, it was euphoria, it was a profound sense of being, at long last, completely and utterly myself. I had almost forgotten she was there. Slowly, heart in my throat, I turned around. Chloe was still in the armchair, but she was leaning forward now, her hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes were wide, and her lips were slightly parted. She wasn't looking at me with shock or confusion or even just curiosity. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated awe. She looked at me the way one looks at a painting, or a sunset, or something unexpectedly and breathtakingly beautiful. She didn't say a word. She just drank me in, her gaze traveling from the straps on my shoulders, down to the silk and lace on my chest, the defined line of my waist, and down the long, sheer expanse of my legs. The silence was the most profound compliment she could have ever given me. It was a silence that said everything. It said, I see you. It said, you are beautiful. It said, this is not strange. This is wonderful. When she finally spoke, her voice was a breathy, wondrous whisper. Oh, Leo. You were right. It's not a costume. It's art. Her words hung in the air, more validating than 1,000 compliments. Art. She saw it not as a fetish, not as a quirk, but as a form of aesthetic expression. She saw it the way I saw it. A slow smile spread across my face, breaking the spell of silent reverence. Thank you, I said, the words feeling small and inadequate for the magnitude of what I felt. Thank you for seeing it. For seeing me. She finally rose from the armchair and walked toward me, her movements slow and deliberate. She stopped just in front of me, her eyes still wide with wonder. She reached out a hand, not to touch me, but just to hover her palm over the lace of the bra on my chest, as if feeling the energy of it. I have to admit, she said, her voice low and intimate, a part of me was just curious. I couldn't fully picture it. But this. She shook her head, a small, amazed laugh escaping her lips. This makes so much sense. You hold yourself differently. You stand taller. It's like you're illuminated from within. She finally let her fingers make contact, gently tracing the scalloped edge of the lace where it met my skin. Her touch sent a shiver through me, a sensation that was entirely new. It wasn't the furtive thrill of a secret, but the deep, resonant hum of shared intimacy. This part of me, which had only ever existed for my own eyes, was now being seen, touched, and appreciated by the person I loved most. "Can I?" she asked, her gaze dropping to the garter straps. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. She knelt before me, a gesture of such unexpected tenderness that it took my breath away. She ran her hand down my leg, over the sheer nylon, her touch featherlight. She followed the perfect line of the back seam with her fingertip, from my ankle all the way up to my thigh. "The craftsmanship," she murmured, her face close to my leg. "It's incredible." She examined the small, silver-toned clip where the stocking met the garter strap, studying it like a jeweler examining a precious stone. "It's so beautifully designed. Everything has a purpose." She looked up at me from where she knelt, her eyes glowing with a warmth that melted the last, deepest vestiges of any lingering insecurity. "You have an amazing eye, Leo. The things you choose, they're always the most elegant." The fact that she saw this as my talent, my aesthetic, was a revelation. She wasn't just indulging me, she was empowering me. She was a partner in this, not just a spectator. She stood up slowly, her hands sliding from my legs up to my waist, resting on the silk of the garter belt. We were standing chest to chest, the delicate fabric the only thing between us. "So," she whispered, a playful, mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "This is what you're wearing for your birthday dinner." I blinked, thrown. "Dinner? I thought this was the main event." "Oh, it is," she assured me, her smile widening. "But I made reservations. At that little Italian place you love. The one with the dark, candlelit corner booths." Her hand slid from my waist up my back, her fingers tracing the line of my bra strap through my skin. "And I don't want you to cover any of it up." "Well," she amended with a laugh, "we should probably add a shirt. And pants. But that's it. No hoodie." My mind reeled. She didn't just want me to wear this for her in the privacy of my apartment. She wanted to go out. Again. But this time it wasn't a test of bravery born from a text message. It was a celebration. A victory lap. The idea of sitting in a public place, dressed like this under a thin layer of normal clothes, no longer sparked terror. It sparked a delicious, thrilling sense of rebellion, a secret we would share in a room full of strangers. "Okay," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "Let's do it."